meeting to order. It is 5 p.m. on August 6, 2020. And the next thing on the agenda is the roll call, starting to my far right.
All right, here.
Hogan here. Johnson here.
Iverson here.
Eastman here.
Thank you. Could our clerk please certify the posting of the meeting?
I certify that on Monday, August 3rd, 2020, the agenda for the Town of Rome Board meeting for Thursday, August 6th, 2020 was emailed to the Wisconsin Rapids Tribune at 7:55 a.m. on Tuesday, August 4th, posted at Rome Town Hall at 5:37 p.m., at Fritzl's Trading Post at 5:42 p.m., and at Nacusa Port Edward State Bank at 5:47 p.m.
Thank you. Item 4 is approve the agenda, and before we make a motion, I would ask consideration of the board that item 15 become item 14, item 16 become item 15, and item 14 become item 16. In other words, moving the dates and items for future agenda meetings prior to a possible closed session. Are there any other changes or a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion with those changes to
Second.
position again.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. We can all stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would ask the clerk, have we received any requests for citizen comment?
No.
Thank you. Hearing none, we will dispense with reading the requirements for item 6 and 6A. Moving on to no action contemplated, except possible referral to future agenda. Item 7, information updates, meeting recaps, recent correspondence, current events, and announcements. We'll start with Mr. Bauerheit. Do you have anything to report?
Yes, the park plan is moving along. We have the wells have been installed, and the pump is installed in the well. We had a pickup day scheduled for yesterday, and we had 8 people come to help us pick up sticks and pull out roots and those items. So I'd like to thank these people individually, Supervisor Jerry Iverson, our town administrator, Jamie Garrett, Parks and Recreation Committee member Gabriel, and the 2 children, Nicholas and Diana. Also, 2 draft members were there, Sue Leahy and draft member Barry Cutswell. All those people helped. And we were able to pull out 2 truckloads of roots and things like that. So I think we're ready to move forward.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Hogan?
Just an announcement, I think everybody knows the library is open, it's been open, but with the change that face masks are now required, so if you're going to the library, please bring the appropriate PPE equipment. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing to report. Gerald?
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Jared?
Yes, the Sherman Water Ski Team will be celebrating their 45th anniversary. The celebration at Lake Sherwood Lodge for wedding on Saturday, August 15th, starting at 11 a.m., going through 8 p.m. There'll be 2 ski shows, one at noon, one at 5, and there'll be music, refreshments, and fun night for everybody. And help them celebrate 45 years in our community.
What was the date again?
August 15th,
August 15th, at what time?
11 o'clock to 8 o'clock, 11 a.m.
Okay, thank you.
11 a.m. to 8 p.m.
It is discussion item 13.
Mrs. David, do you have anything to report as administrator?
I just wanted to share, I shared at the CDA meeting too, just because there's been some communication within the town about COVID information, COVID data, and cases that we have here in Adams County. So I just wanted to share with the public where this information is located. Adams County Public Health is keeping track of the county website, COVID information, testing sites, and cases here within the county. So if you go to Adams County homepage, which all counties are the same in the state, it's co.adams.wi.us. And right on their homepage, there's a tab for COVID-19. You would click on that, and then there's Adams County COVID-19 data. Their GIS department's been working on this nice dashboard that citizens can use to identify where cases, that if there are cases in your municipality. So you can see right now for Rome, it's identified that there are between 11 and 15 cases, and it shows over here on the left-hand side of progression by date, total number of positive cases, recovered deaths, and negative lab test results. So I just wanted to identify for individuals where this information is located off of the county website. And again, this dashboard is getting updated by Public Health on a very regular basis. It says on the bottom that, again, it was just updated a few moments ago. So I just wanted to share with the board, and since we film these meetings, with anyone that's watching in the community where they could get that data.
Thank you. Anything else to report? Hearing none, we'll move on to discuss and possible action on the following items. Item 8, discussion and action, approval of the July 16th, 2020 meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve as presented.
Second. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carried. Thank you. Item 9, discussion and action. Checks, vouchers, receipts, and journal entries. Approved checks number 41958 through 42063 totaling $365,889.69. Automatic payments totaling $23,134.08. State, Social Security, Medicare withholdings totaling $51,522.38. Payroll vouchers V15648 through V15833 totaling $127,603.32. And checks number 21594 through 21603 totaling $2,652.15. And receipts number 21037 through 21153 totaling $291,422.17. Do we have a motion to approve checks, vouchers, receipts, and journal entries?
Move to approve checks, vouchers, receipts, journal entries.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
One question I have, and asked Jamie earlier, the check to Ever by $3,303, is that for your action?
That was, I believe, for a deer hit on a, I forget which squad it was, but it was for a deer hit, yes.
So we got some recovery from the insurance.
Yes, except for our $500 deductible, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carried. Item 10, discussion and action, updated contagious infection response policy with personal protective equipment, also known as PPE, necessary and required. Ms. David.
I included the updated response policy in your packet. You wouldn't necessarily need to take action on it tonight. At the last board meeting, you had said that the fire chief and I could update this policy with the appropriate PEE requirements. Obviously, the state has also gone since that meeting to a statewide requirement for masks. So, but this was an updated policy from our last meeting from that conversation, so I just wanted to make sure I closed that communication loop and included it in the packet for you this evening.
Any questions or comments?
I think you did a good job on it.
I agree with that.
Very,
Yes.
very detailed.
Thank you. Item 11, discussion only, potential regulation of tree houses, tree structures, or playhouses through zoning code. Attorney Flanagan, would that be yours?
Administrator will start, and I will,
So there was a brief memo that was included in your packet. Tonight is just a discussion only to sort of get the board's perspective on this. It's a topic that has come up in the past about tree houses or tree structures. So we wanted, this has to go through plan commission, but again, we just wanted to sort of start the conversation tonight to see if there was interest in adding this to town code and what that potential vision that you see it being added is.
okay, so I wanted to just give a bit of an overview as to where we regulate these kind of structures currently in our ordinances. And then I can also go into a bit of items that we might consider for, to receive your feedback from, for further regulating them and where we might do that. Really there's three ordinance areas where we regulate them now. Those would be under chapter 360, chapter 142, and chapter 266. So I'll address those each individually. So chapter 360, that's our zoning ordinance. So by our building inspector, I believe you've seen the communication that tree houses are not considered accessory structures by his opinion. And so I would say that currently under our zoning ordinance, there are minimal zoning regulations that are apart from overall height and setback requirements specific to this. So there's certainly opportunity for additional regulations in our zoning ordinance. Where we probably have the most regulations right now is in our building code, which is chapter 142. So 142, the definition of structures certainly encompasses tree houses and playhouses, so those would be treated as structures, considered structures. If under 150 square feet, UDC wouldn't apply. However, by our building code, structures can't be substandard. That's very clearly put in our building code. And so it does need to be able to meet the standards of chapter 142, but keep in mind that that's separate from being subject to UDC, because if it's under 150 square feet, UDC doesn't apply. And so specifically in our building code, we have section 142-8 that says that structures need to be safe and stable in design and construction or removed. And so that is usually what we use. You may be familiar, we haven't done that in the town recently, but you may be familiar with the idea of if we have to raise a structure. If a structure is so in district area that we can raise. The provision I just read to you is typically the lead into that, to then move towards the raising, a raise order that would involve the building inspector. That's why building inspector is involved, because the sections of that are under our building code. So those are the main sections of our building code where these structures would be regulated. There is one other section, I said that chapter 266 is an additional area. So 266 actually is where we have our offenses for nuisances. So that is where our nuisance section is in, under chapter 266. And so it can't be in such a state of repair as to constitute a nuisance. So usually, nuisance will kind of go hand in hand with that section of the building code. If it's in such a state of disrepair, it's typically a nuisance, as the neighbors, it degrades property values, so on and so forth. And so there is some remedies that we can proceed through the nuisance ordinance as well. If it's not in such a state of disrepair, but it's structurally in a way that is a safety concern, we can still capture that under our building code, but it may not be a nuisance, if that makes sense. So if it isn't all shambles, There isn't scattered debris everywhere on the lot. It's just a structure that is unsafe, that it would probably be building code and not nuisance.
Here's a question, you know, we watch on the news cities like Detroit that have blighted neighborhoods, and at some point the city is capable to come in and knock those structures down. When you talk about a nuisance, would that be synonymous with blighted? Is there a correlation, a nexus there between the two? Or is there something additional that we should be considering when you have a blighted structure on a property in addition to the sections that you already addressed?
So that's a good question. So sometimes those will actually form a district around an area that has been identified as in need of rejuvenation or blighted neighborhoods, if you will. In those cases, they're likely actually going to be approached under what we have as chapter 142. Okay, because when you get to nuisance, you're actually saying that the property owner needs to clean up, or we can go through the statutes, we can actually bring a civil action and go on the property if the court, once we get the court order to do so, and actually clean up the property ourselves. In your case, with what you're mentioning, it's probably more raising buildings. You know, there can be exceptions to that because sometimes you'll actually have cities purchase the buildings in a block with the overall concept plan in mind, you know, to rejuvenate that area. And so it definitely isn't a singular approach. There's not usually a singular approach for that. For us, we would probably capture such a thing in our building code. And if it was really bad on specific lots, we could capture that through nuisance.
So your advice would be what we have in 142 would be adequate to deal with some blighted items on property?
Items on property is probably 266. If it's a structure that is blighted or in a state of disrepair, 142 as well. What I'm saying when I say those three areas, and specifically when I say that 260 doesn't have a lot in there right now, particularly after it's been looking at it's not accessory structure, there is an opportunity to regulate tree houses and places. And that's kind of a lead into this discussion. And so I wanted to, you also have an idea of what we do regulate and where we may have some room for further regulation. And where we might regulate them further is probably in zone. And it would be under its own section for tree houses and playhouses, likely differentiating between the two, because of course we have playhouses can run the gamut, right? You have playhouses that are just little playhouses that, you know, you buy from the department store and set up, and then you can go all the way to more elaborate. You can actually go all the way to something that actually has electric, you know, and that run to it. And I can talk about what that means, but that actually would bring it into likely 142 as well. So my point is, you first probably differentiate between the two, so you can regulate them just a bit different. Because playhouses don't necessarily need to be anchored in the same way that tree houses and maybe more elaborate play structures are, if that makes sense.
If I could follow up, it seems that recently we've had what I would describe as some blight in properties or property and significant concern by neighbors and other residents that have been brought to all of our attention. What we now have, would that be adequate, in your opinion, to deal with the current situations?
I think we can address the current situations with what we have. We have other options as well going forward to address similar types of situations with additional provisions that would be limiting perhaps placement on the lot. But usually you'll see that as limiting the placement on the street side of lots or the front yards of lots, not necessarily, so it's usually keeping them to side yards that aren't facing the street and backyards. You can require an application to construct. You can make clear that they must be properly maintained. You can put limits on heights. You can put limits on the footprint areas. And you can just say limits on the footprint area before it's considered an accessory structure, and that would be working with the building inspector. So if he's comfortable with that kind of threshold spot to where it would be considered an accessory structure, because it is my opinion that at some point, something like this would be considered an accessory structure. Now, maybe that's 150 square feet, maybe it's less, but I would want to make sure, since if we were to enforce this, I would certainly be calling on the building inspector to testify. I want him to be comfortable with that threshold if we were to put something in there like that.
Yes, sir, that's the question. What happens to a lot owner who constructs something without a building permit? Like a structure, like in case we're talking about this tree house, it never had a permit to begin with. Isn't that against one of these codes that we're talking about in 142?
Sure, so there would first be a question of whether a building permit applies, number one. I mean, if I was just working through this, if I was going through the calculus, right? First question is, does a building permit apply? I believe that's something that would involve the zoning administrator and the building inspector to opine on, okay? Let's say that the building permit does apply and it wasn't taken up. There's a penalty for that. So we would notice the property owner that a construction was started without a building permit. We would inform them of the penalty for a failure to get a building permit. And then I would also say that I believe our fee schedule is no exception. We typically have a double penalty for a permit that is not taken up before.
They have a penalty and still have the structure remaining, right?
Well, at some point, it will be more costly. If they're not going to get the, are you saying a situation where they're, of the standpoint that they're not going to get a building permit even when they're being told they need to have one?
No, they pay the penalty for the building permit, so they pay a double permit fee, right? And that structure is allowed to stand.
Well, it better be built according to standards. I mean, if it's subject to a building permit, it's going to have the building inspector inspect it. And it needs to be constructed to certain standards.
We're going to give you another case. What about a case where they decide to bring the substandard structure up to a building code? Is it permit required for that?
Well, so technically, if they were going to go through the cost and time and, all that to bring a structure up to the building code, because that definitely could be very costly. Likely involves engineering and additional construction, but that would go back to 142. So technically, that would require, if it was subject to a building permit, without a fee, if they went through the process and in our building inspector's opinion that it was no longer a unsafe structure, then yes. Provided that that structure was allowed to be there in the first place. So, it's not within the setback area. It doesn't exceed the height. My point is, if we had, to the specific situation, let's just say, for example, we had a height limitation of 10 feet, then I will just say that if the structure was above that, the answer is it can't exceed that. That would be a violation of our ordinance. In your example, if we're not going into specific facts of what it might be a violation or not, then potentially they could pay the double fee, they could go through the process of getting to a construction standard that is deemed by our building inspector through the inspection as safe. And yes, they could, all other things aside, keep the structure. When I say all other things, I mean all our other ordinance requirements.
I have another question. would it be possible if we addressed tree houses, that we put a stipulation that it must be attached to a live tree? Somebody could have a 4-foot stump, and that's a tree house, and build it on top of that 4 foot. I think it kind of defeats the purpose.
I think we should just say that no tree houses are allowed between a permanent home and a lake. It's a lakes district, regardless of the setback.
So we're just
75
addressing,
feet or 100 feet.
we're just addressing Lake District, then, you just want to regulate, prohibit tree houses in the lake, in the backyard, between the house and the lake? Okay. That's a thought, I just want to make sure. So what we're doing is if this is going to be in 360, the administrator did a great job with the memo. This would be a referral, if you wish, to the planning commission to propose ordinance language. And it would go through the process that is involved with the zoning ordinance before it got back to you. So feedback, it would be referral and feedback to the planning commission. If that's something that you would like to refer to the planning commission and provide them as feedback, sure, but that's definitely a district regulation. So that would be how we look at our ordinance, would probably be a section for playhouses and tree houses, or playhouses and play structures. And now you're talking about a district regulation that is in a different part of our zoning ordinance under LD. Now you want to add in a section in there that says what can or can't be placed in, not even the rear yard, it would be between the lake
The current
and.
structure, as I understand it, is not within the 100-foot setback. And if they choose to improve it to the point where it could pass a code inspection, it could be allowed to stand.
And I also want to make clear that when we talk about a zoning ordinance, you need to remember that we have what's called a non-conforming structure. So when we put in place zoning ordinance restrictions or requirements, those structures that exist before our zoning ordinance changes are deemed non-conforming structures. It's very important to know. So this doesn't mean that our zoning ordinance puts things in place and then all of a sudden it goes back and retroactively applies to everyone. That was why it was, I thought, very important to put in and very good that she did put in that we are talking, this discussion is community. You know, it's definitely, we can't look at this as something that's going on right now and how to address that. We're going through the process of addressing that. We're looking at town-wide, how you want to address these structures, if you do.
I kind of like the idea of the Lake District because there are properties here where people own larger sections of land. They have hunting stands, they have other things on there that aren't bothering anybody, but they might have problems with an ordinance or, passing something that is, restricted for everybody. But this will take care of that problem with somebody building between the house and the lake, building structures that would obstruct other views or create a nuisance, all of that. I think that's a good idea.
And are we talking about, not to make this more complicated, but I want to make sure that I hone this in if the intention is to hone it in. Are we talking about structures, if you said structures, or are we talking about playhouses and tree houses? The reason I say that is certainly intentional. Let's say you have a back shed, a little garden shed. It's a structure, most certainly by the definition in chapter 142. Are we saying that you're not going to allow the back sheds or structures, or are we just talking about tree houses and playhouses? And then where are you going to allow them in the Lake District?
A question for you, aren't there certain rules about how close you can build a back shed to water?
Absolutely. That's called setback, and we definitely have different
Kind
setbacks.
of take care of that
That's
problem.
because there are people who have homes that are 150 feet away from the shore, and they could build after the setback, if you live is 100 feet, they could build within that distance between the house and the setback. If the setback is 75 feet, which is possible, gonna go, like 75 feet or 100 feet back, you can carve a house.
But again, I think the question that I have has to be answered, because it's going to come up at planning commission. Are we talking about structures, or are we talking about playhouses and tree houses?
Well, first of all, I think all structures require a building permit. No, they should, if they're between the house and the lake. So these things can be reviewed before they happen.
So that would definitely involve the building inspector giving his thoughts. I know right now in LD, we don't require building permits for, I believe it's 150 square feet or less. So you're definitely, we're having this conversation, and it's good that we are, but just note that the ramifications that this is going to potentially have, and also, if you don't have a lot that has a principal structure, because there are definitely those in the Lake District as well, but have a shed, what is that going to do to that?
And the shed's not allowed, first of all, in the setback area where it is. Anyway,
I'm sorry?
the shed would not be allowed under today's regulations that we have within the setback area.
Absolutely correct, yes.
So that covers at least the setback area.
Only the setback area, but I'm still trying to work through your comments about not allowing it between the structure and the lake. Because,
Between the house and the lake.
okay, so what about a lot that does not have a house?
Well, then certainly, I guess you just have to say it's not required within the setback area. Not within the setback.
So they can still put it there, they can still put it somewhere anywhere on the lot.
Yeah,
As
as
long
long
as
as
it doesn't
it
have-
they come along, build a house, and they go along and have it, right?
Time out. I think if you got a vacant lot, but you got a house on each side of that lot, that could be a nuisance to the property owners. So there should be something about building close to the neighbor's lot.
Well, that's the side yard setback, there are setback requirements.
Because you have side setbacks and also, you know, distance between the house and
The size of it is only about 10 feet.
I'm not saying that it's not good ideas, I'm just making sure that we are talking through the ramifications of some of that. Because I think it started as playhouses and treehouses, and now we're definitely talking about garden sheds and other structures, and that's fine with you, but it's gonna look differently in the wording. And the building permit piece, I would say we need to involve our building inspector on.
Would we not be better just at this point to focus on tree houses and playhouses, and then once we get through that, that will give us some guidance to then look at these other structures.
Sure, absolutely.
But I'm just concerned that a person can build a structure without a permit, years later come along and pay them a fee, and be assessed for the fact that it doesn't meet building code, and then they can bring it up to building code.
That can happen, legally.
can't you just transfer the ground buildings or build on the ground? Do this thing and then go on in the future.
Restrict elevated structures. They playhouses, tree houses, elevated structures over 6 feet.
Okay, and then definitely define all these, so people certainly we can do that.
Everybody's got their own terminology for tree house or playhouse.
Absolutely, I mean, any of this is gonna need a definition.
So elevated structure covers anything that's off the ground.
Now, we have a brand new tree house real close to here, if you go down Alpine, and on the left, right when you look at the hill, going down the Z, if you look to the left, there's a really nice tree house that looked like it was constructed better than some houses. So, you know,
There's a unchecked, unblank.
And is
That's
this,
not bigger, but that's not in the lake district.
right.
well, are we just regulating, are we proposing regulating this only in the Lake District?
So you can't regulate it in the whole town because of unchecks and those are all elevated structures. Fine.
That makes sense.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was clear because package, and I want to be able to present it in a way that gives them direction as far as where to go with the zoning ordinance and how to approach it. So, thank you.
Anything else on item 11?
Yeah, just to reiterate, I don't think it's right to have a structure that's built without a permit and without applying the building code, and then be allowed to come along and pay the double fine, and then be allowed to bring it up to standard.
Is that unique to us? I don't believe so.
I don't know if that was, I think that was generally, but otherwise, no, I will say that that's not, you're not unique in that, that's,
Can you bring that to the attention of the planning commission when they work
Yeah,
on
let
this?
them deal with it, let them talk about it.
well, that's actually more of a building code. So I will bring that to the zoning administrator's attention so we can let the building inspector know and chew on that and come up with, if there's a recommendation of other options. But that's definitely more of a building code. So, all that, it's not,
Anything else? Moving on to item 12, discussion only. Update on concerns with noise and change to town code related to water ice events on area lakes. I think this originated concern about people that are bull hunting on pink well all night long, trying to get carp. And people trying to sleep and the lights shining in their windows. And then as I thought about this, there's snowmobile races on the ice, there's ATV races on the ice, there's who knows what other kind of motorized races on the ice. And I guess it was hard to read the analysis of what we could and couldn't do. I guess I turned that over to item 12.
I think the same way, I'll start and then Nick will take it from there. There was a memo included in your packet that talked about sort of how we got to this place with the noise and the events that are happening on water. There is a piece of state statute that talks about water with shared jurisdictions, which would be Lake Peatone as a shared jurisdiction. And about how if we would enact code, they would all have to agree to that code for it to be enforceable. So we do have some draft language, it wasn't included in the packet, but that draft language at this point would only apply to the 3 lakes within the municipality, Camelot, Sherwood, and Arrowhead. We would have to work with other municipalities that share the jurisdiction around Peatone for that to be enforceable. But with that said, then I'll turn it over to Nick for the rest of the story.
okay, so what I'll do is I'll separate this as best I can between the concerns that have been expressed with the noise, the light, all of that with Lake Peatone, with fishing, and then I'll address the races regattas section that we had talked about and was referred to for including winter events. And so over the past, I at first wanted to say several months, but I think it's been much longer than that. We've heard concerns with the noise and the light on Lake Peatone, as the chairman said, particularly related to some of that night fishing. And so what I did was I pulled all the statutes because I think that's the place to start. And then I'll review those with you, and then I'll go into enforcement and why that's concerned, what options may exist, and I think that's a good lead-in then to the winter events. So, going through the statutes, there's a few statutes that relate to this. First, there's 30.62. Those are muffler requirements. Those are muffler requirements for vessels, and it's unlawful to have a muffler that exceeds 86 decibels. In that same section, under sub 2, it states specifically that no ordinance can be established that enforces noise levels for motorboats unless it's identical, meaning you can't pass an ordinance that's stricter We can't pass an ordinance that's less strict, it has to be identical. 86 decibels is the number. I would also note that in talking with the chief, that there is a specific meter that would be needed to regulate the decibels or read the decibel levels from vessels. That is not a meter that we have. We have a meter for decibels. It would not be a meter that would hold up against a challenge to the decibel levels from a muffler on a vessel. Those, I believe, that you can correct me, Chief, if I misstate this, are in around the $5,000 range to obtain. And that is completely apart from the enforcement piece, which I will touch on in a moment. Second, in 2017, there was a law passed in Chapter 29.405 that bars the DNR from prohibiting the taking of rough fish or catfish by hand or with bow and arrow or crossbow. In other words, it allows the fishing with the bow. So bow fishing is allowed at any time, including from sunset to sunrise, and it does state that lights are illegal to use and like with bow fishing. That is actually in statute under 29.314, which is creating an exception from, it's actually the section that relates to the shining of animals. It creates an exception for the shining of wild animals where it's used for use of a bow and arrow or a crossbow for taking fish. And so there are exceptions carved out in the statutes to allow this to be used. I do want to make it clear before I get into enforcement that it doesn't mean deliberate shining in hoses is okay. That would be different. But I realize that when you're using the lights for fishing, there's also that glare. And that's difficult from an enforcement standpoint. That's difficult to enforce because it's allowed as that exception in statute. But enforcement, I've mentioned it a couple times, enforcement is a concern. It's a concern where there's a water body that has more than one jurisdiction sharing. In other words, with people. You can enforce with that. You can enforce on those waters, but first we'll go with water events. With water events, it takes an ordinance that meets one of two criteria. Either all of the municipalities having jurisdiction on that water adopt identical ordinances. That's one option. Second option is at least 50% of the municipalities that have at least 60% of the shoreline area on the water, on the body of water. I'll give you an example of that, because the town of Rome at one time did have an ordinance that enforced slow away on people. And what they did was they did the second option that I just talked about. They had an identical ordinance adopted, in that case, by Monroe, Rome, Armenia, Port Edwards, and Saratoga. And because of some other issues, we did, we repealed that ordinance. We don't have that ordinance on the books anymore. Because we treat it differently, and we still regulate slow away, but we regulate it for different reasons. We actually, in fact, involved the DNR. And that is my segue to say that what option we could do is, so DNR does have the ability to enforce. DNR does have the ability to regulate on these waters. And we don't need to have an ordinance that meets the requirements that we would have to use. And so it might be a recommendation, after talking with the chief, that the town write a letter to the DNR asking for additional enforcement due to the concerns with that night fishing. And that's where we can have some possible enforcement with, if there is deliberate light pollution, if there's the exceedance of decibel levels. But I know the DNR, so I gave the example where we had an ordinance and we repealed it. We repealed it, like I said, for various reasons. One of them was the enforceability. We had met the threshold for other municipalities adopting we hadn't met the threshold for getting the DNR to sign off. DNR is involved either way. It may be a good starting point before trying to get the other municipalities to enact an identical ordinance, to just write the DNR and see if we can get some reprieve from them by way of the enforcement of the water during those events.
I have no problem with the fishing at all. I got family members that shoot carp in the middle of the night. I think the primary issue is a couple hundred decibels that rattles the windows in your house, and you can hear from miles away. Basically, big block V8s with no mufflers. That's the issue.
Yes, and that would, from the sounds of that, it's against statute. And DNR could enforce that. And so maybe the starting point would be that we reach out, we have a contact, we've worked with the DNR in the past to explore what options we had, and we continue to I think, maintain a relationship that we can reach out to DNR and at least see what their willingness to enforce statute on that body of waters.
My suggestion would be, I'm one of 5, that our administrator be directed to write that letter and make contact with the Wisconsin Rapids DNR office about this issue to see if there is any possible cooperation and assistance.
And
Does that
then-
be fair?
Sounds good.
We have consensus, so you're thereby directed to do such.
And then just knowing that by exactly what I just talked about from the enforcement standpoint, there may be other options, but this is certainly the easiest way to start. Because getting all the other municipalities or 50% of them is going to take considerable more effort. So then the other piece is our ordinance section on races, regattas, sporting events, and exhibitions. At a previous meeting, we had talked about that section and its lack of a needing a permit for winter events. I call it winter events, and then we had some discussion about what winter events we would want to regulate. I would just note that the same kind of analysis for enforcement exists for lay people. It's a different section of statute. It's under 30.80, I believe, but it's still, or 30.81. It still requires, in this case, it isn't 2 options, it's only 1. It requires all the municipalities to adopt the identical ordinance. So considerably more than the half. It's all the municipalities having the jurisdiction on that body of water adopt an identical ordinance. In other words, I have drafted, and we don't have it yet because I think it was worth a conversation at this meeting first. I have drafted language for regulating winter events. I built it into the races and regatta section. But just know that if you were to approve that ordinance, it would be requiring that on related tribes. But it wouldn't be enforceable on people. Nor is your current ordinance enforceable on people. It is on the tribes.
Any questions? Hearing none, let's move on to item 13. Discussion and possible action. Approve a temporary Class B retailer's license for Sherlock Water Ski Team for the Sherlock Anniversary Celebration that we heard about earlier this evening on August 15th from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. at 1146 West Queensway, which is Lake Sherwood Lodge. Do I have a motion to approve that?
I'd like to make that motion with an addition. And I'm saying this because I went to the water ski show this last week, and obviously the skiers are not going to be wearing masks, and it says right on there, they don't wear a mask. But if you're a spectator, and you're enclosed in that small area and you're watching, whether it be like Arrowhead or Sherwood, wherever they're going to perform, the audience needs to be aware that there's the 6-foot interval between people, there's that separation, there's wearing the face So what I'd like to do is to make the motion to grant this license to them, but that we send them the five things for safety, the 5 steps that the CDC, this is in Washington DC from the White House, and that they announce this before and during the show and or during their events. And that's my motion.
I'll second that. Discussion.
Are you asking that they just announce that, or are you asking them to enforce
I'm
this?
asking them to announce that they've got their hands full just to put on the show. And this is a great show, and they do a great job with it. But the people that are spectators there, a lot of times are coming from different places, different states, different wherever, and then they're gonna leave after that and go back, and who knows what they're bringing with them to take. So I'm asking that they just announce it. If they can just announce it before and during the show, I think that will help someone.
Do they have flyers for this event?
Yes.
So, can we say we'll approve this, however, you have to include those 5 steps on the flyers?
The flyers are already dispersed in the
Oh,
community.
okay,
Yes.
all right. Then just, they have to announce it.
They could post this too, you know, so people see it when they're coming in, that they have these posted. Maybe
And I don't think there's a representative from them here tonight, but I can email them a PDF of that flyer and just say that the town board approved the license, but would ask that you announce these 5 safety items through the evening.
You know, on that topic, we've been pretty fortunate in Adams County until just recently on the pandemic that's going across the world. And the numbers in Adams County are going up rapidly. And events like this where people aren't safe escalates the number of coronavirus cases in our community. I think some people are starting to wake up and take this serious. I thought it was a hoax in the past. There's been some deaths, not necessarily many right here in Adams County, but family members and relatives and friends of people from Rome have lost people to coronavirus. And I think I agree completely with John that we need to do everything we can to ask people to comply with the safety measures to get this under control. I don't think it's confidential. We have a meeting with the county health department today, some of us, and the unofficial tally as of right now, I believe is 84, 83, and just a couple of weeks ago, we were in the 10s and 20s. So it is escalating rapidly. And you ever do the trick where you take a penny and you put it down on the table and you double that penny every day? So tomorrow it's 2 cents, the day after that it's 4 cents, and it's 8 cents. You know how many days it takes to get to $1 million? Not very many. And the same thing with this pandemic that we're all dealing with. We have a motion and a second discussion. Any other discussion before I call a vote? Hearing none, all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Remember, we changed the agenda. Item 14 is now next agenda items. Other than normal business, does any supervisor have any requests to be added to the next agenda other than normal business?
Over the last several days, I've seen some negative remarks, postings on the Nextdoor app. unfortunate that when you read people's postings that are completely false, there's not much we can do. I am not going to respond to those just based on my position here on the board. But I don't know that there's a means that we can update our community as far as the transfer site, our involvement or lack thereof with the push from the county to get curbside pickup. That seems to be an issue. Comments such as it is a ploy to close the transfer site in order that we go to curbside pickup. I don't ever recall discussing closing the transfer site, so I don't know where that information comes from. But unfortunately, in the world we live in, social media and the way people post things, it's fake news.
Jamie has commented before on some of those articles, especially for curbside pickup, I believe. Can't they remember it?
Well, we've had Adams County here, I think, 3 times
Right.
in the conversation about curbside service and changes that they're proposing to our transfer site. So we, at this moment, and I said during the annual meeting, are considering curbside service, but we will have an increase in transfer site operations through Portage County, through Adams County next year. But
Maybe we can publicize when we believe the compactor is going to get repaired.
the compactor should already be there. Because we're in contract with Adams County, they repair that compactor as part of that. It's hard to talk with a mask. So they took it in to get it repaired. It's not something I guess they could do there at the landfill. So it is back now.
It should help improve it considerably.
It does. And, you know, the other comment was from an elderly person. The attendants are there to help people. If somebody needs help, all they have to do is ask for help instead of trying to struggle with lifting refuse, garbage, whatever, especially into the large open top containers. Most of you know that, to me, that transfer site is a golden ticket here in the town of Rome. It is huge. It is used considerably. It is a great resource that we are all contributing to. So I just, it's frustrating when I see the comments and the negativity, and it's all based on absolutely no fact at all.
We can add a piece to, certainly now as we go through the budget process, we'll be having extra meetings along with working through the town budget, but then this fall, we have the opportunity to present the budget, and we have our town meeting, and maybe we can add to a piece of that, just a little update on the transfer site, where we're at, what's happening, what we see coming through the future. That would be a little bit broader audience, because we encourage the public to come for the budget presentation. So we can add a piece to that, I think.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, moving on to item 15. I believe our next meeting date time is August 20th at 5 p.m. Is that acceptable to everybody? Okay, thank you. Let's then back up, which was item 14 has now become item 16. And let me set how we're going to do this. The first thing that I need to do, we have people here that are involved in item 16 as it's amended as far as the liquor license. Would you we're set up to go into closed session, you have the right to demand that it be an open session. I don't know who's going to speak on your behalf, but is your preference open or closed?
You mean after we have our discussion tonight?
Yeah.
Closed session, yes, it's fine,
Closed session?
yes.
Okay, thank you. That being said, a new item amended 16, the board may convene in closed session under 19.85 subsection 1 subsection B for considering dismissal, demotion, licensing, or discipline of any public employee or person licensed by a board or a commission, or the investigation of charges against such person, or considering the grant or denial of tenure for a university faculty member, and then taking a formal action on any such matter, provided that the faculty member, whether public employee or person licensed, is given actual notice of any evidentiary hearing, which may be held prior to final action being taken, at any meeting at which final action may be taken. I apologize, we have to go under a specific statute to do this. Review operations, specifically, review operations plans submitted by Friar Tuck's FTB&G Incorporated as a requirement to Class B liquor license renewal. And there's been an indication that we would do this in closed session. So I would call for a motion second, and it will be a roll call vote. Is there a motion to go into closed session under the statute as I just read?
I so move.
Do I hear a second? Motion second, any consideration, discussion? Hearing none, I will call for a roll call vote. I'll start to my far left.
Weaver, yes.
Iverson, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Hogan, yes.
All right, yes.
Thank you. We have some business here to take care of, and that's a determination if we will remain in this room. If we are, we do need to turn off the camera and the audio. So it would be at my direction as chair that we do temporarily turn off video and audio so we can go ahead and have this discussion in the closed session.
So, Mr. Chairman, then I would suggest that when you adjourn, you would, when this closed session is over, it would be adjournment, because when the video is stopped and the WebEx is turned off, then it's turned off. You have to
People
start.
might be coming back to the open session, so that's for the camera and those watching at home.
Okay. So
Is
if you
there
give me-
anybody, excuse me, this is in regards